So then we have this idea about our kids. They're going to just be wonderful and perfect. And then we find out, who is this animal? Am I responsible for this? What did I do wrong, God? See, there's a reason why the kid weighs 20 pounds.
Okay.
You can pick them up by the back of their neck and you can move them from point A to point B.
As needed.
As needed.
As needed. Hey everybody, before we jump into today's episode, we'd like to recognize all those who make this podcast possible. The Lead Today show is supported by all the generous donors of the Lead Today community. Thank you so much for investing in shaping leaders through this podcast. And be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you are watching or listening today. All right, let's jump into the podcast. Welcome to the Today Count Show. My name is Winston Harris, and I'm joined by Jim Piper. And man, we're here today. We're going to jump right into it. And well, first of all, man, this is the first podcast officially in the Today Count studio.
It is.
This is a dream.
It's exciting. I visualized it, but here we are. And
live and in the flesh.
Yeah, here we go. Let's do this.
Man, Jim challenged me to come with a topic that I had a conviction about, and being a father of a 3-year-old girl and having a baby girl on the way. Parenting has been heavy on my heart and on my mind. And I came across this topic recently. This report, actually, the Surgeon General in August of 2024 issued a public health warning. And in a 35-page report, it said parenting may be hazardous to your health.
Of course it is.
Why is this now just news? But the reason why it's news, not just alcohol or tobacco, but parenting is hazardous to your health because 2 in 5 parents are saying that they are so stressed that they can't even function.
Wow.
So stressed that they're numb.
40% of parents
now in 2024 saying that parenting has consumed their health, and some of the contributing factors, according to this report, are childcare costs are high. Parents have more demands on their time as opposed to previous decades. Both parents are working more than previous decades, and then technology concerns for parents and children, how to navigate social media and phones. And then parents just having children at an older age, which is also interesting dynamic. And so as it stands, parents are struggling, and we're talking about this on the Today Count show because this is a leadership podcast. We talk about leadership, and parenting is leadership, leading your family, leading yourself, leading your home. And so being a parent, being a grandparent, Jim, what are you seeing from your perspective, today?
Well, I can't help but say this to begin with. If I can, I'd like to go upstream.
Okay.
And my concerns or my thoughts go to this idea. Well, this is why it is. I mean, might be too late to say this. Might not even be fair. It could be another podcast. But who you chose to marry, has a lot to do with this stress that you're in.
Wow.
I think the realities of the economy today and the standards of living obviously bring some challenge to that as well. I think another difficulty is that we do have a lot of noise, a lot of sound bites, a lot of shaming and opinions. And so there's a lot of stuff that I can see that goes against parenting. And of course, the one that I'm sure we'll get to talk about is an unhealthy me. It's pretty tough to have confidence in raising kids. So those are the first things that come to mind. When you said 2 out of 5, and I did the quick math, I'm a mathematician and was able to come up with that 40%.
I'm not a mathematician. I was like 40%, sure, yeah.
I think back when I was when Rhonda and I were raising our kids, Jim and Mandy. I definitely can have a little bit more empathy, be more empathic towards that number, at least in different seasons. We've said before on this show that leadership is about leaning in, and leadership is about love, and love is pain. And so I think maybe just throw this at you, see what you think about it, Winston. So a lot of our stress in life, whatever we're talking about, often comes with misaligned expectations.
Mm,
So we might have this beautiful idea of marriage, and then we
right,
find out, holy smokes, this is a lot of work.
right.
So then we have this idea about our kids. They're gonna, they're gonna just be wonderful and perfect. And then we find out, who is this animal? Am I responsible for this? What did I do wrong, God? And we have those. So I mean, those are the initial things that run through my mind. And though I think my two kids were a blessing in the majority of time, in the sense of just parenting, there were definitely times where I can identify with the stress. But we can probably get into that later.
Yeah, and being a new parent, if you will, I don't know when I'm not new anymore. I don't know what the threshold is there, but having a 3-year-old and being around younger families, there is definitely a rude awakening, if you will. There's this romanticism around, man, having kids, and you think about all the family photos. Which, if I can say, if anybody's listening, you need to pray extra hard before any family photo. Some of the worst meltdowns my daughter's had is before and during, family photos. But
And maybe vaccines.
and maybe shots, maybe
See,
going to the
see, that's
doctors.
one of mine. That's one of the stresses that I remember. Yeah.
A lot of just man, I didn't realize parenting was this hard. A lot of those moments, and that comes from media, right? The portrayal of what man, what's so fun about it, but nobody really kind of pulls the veil back, and the work that is required to parent and parent well. And I think there are a lot of parents out there that when they kind of hit this wall and they're like, okay, like maybe I'm starting to realize the gap between how I was parented and now how do I parent my son or daughter. And there are parents out there that are like seeking for help and seeking for advice and seeking for information. You had mentioned sound bites earlier. Well, one of the things that I wanted to touch on was this new style of parenting that's kind of emerged coming out of the pandemic. Parents are looking for, once again, they're stuck in the house with their kids for the first time maybe in ever, and they're out there like, I need help, and they find these influencers and they find this information on social media about gentle parenting. Have you even heard of gentle parenting?
Not until you mentioned it a couple days ago. And the reason why I'm chuckling is because I've done some research since then, and it's been fun.
Yeah. I mean, gentle parenting. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's kind of a trigger word right now. It's a mainstream style of parenting for millennial parents, and it's kind of a reaction to previous generations and their style of parenting, maybe that was less tolerant, more strict, less emotional. The Gen Z and the Boomer parents. By the way, what generation would you consider yourself?
Well, I'm definitely a boomer.
Okay, so we got a boomer and a millennial talking about parenting.
This should be good.
This should be good. This should be good. And so my people, I guess I'm a representative for the millennials. The premise of gentle parenting that's being embraced by millennial parents is empathy, respect, understanding, which sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
And some of the tenets around gentle parenting is, kind of having this partnership of a parent and a child.
That's interesting.
Allowing the children to make their own decisions.
See, there's a reason why the kid weighs 20 pounds.
Okay.
You can pick them up by the back of their neck and you can move them from point A to point B.
As needed.
As needed.
As needed. Another tenet is embracing emotions. Kind of maybe previous generations have been known to kind of deflect or stuff emotions. And so we're trying to lean into being emotionally healthy. Once again, kind of sounds good, sounds positive.
Yeah.
And another tenet is accepting the child as a whole capable being. And maybe around this idea of gentle parenting, there have been some concerns that have risen, even in culture, right? There's kind of a party that is for gentle parenting, but then there's those who aren't, because they're kind of seeing, maybe behaviors actually aren't changing, and that we're just giving children permission to kind of behave any way that they feel like it. And there's just a lot of conversation around gentle parenting. And so as a boomer parent, what are some initial thoughts about the idea of gentle parenting?
Well, I want to be somewhat intellectual in this and respectful. I've already let the cat out of the bag that I find some of it to be very humorous, and I really am kind of joking around because obviously the intent here is good. We're trying to be good parents. We're trying to do all of that. I guess what burdens me a little bit is why we move away from ancient wisdom,
Mm,
and I, I that bothers me a little bit. When Rhonda and I were younger and had these two kids, I remember when John Maxwell did a Father's Day. I think it was a Father's Day message. This is when he was still pastoring a church in San Diego, and I remember buying that cassette tape and listening to it, and it provided very good proverbial direction
mm,
for parenting. And like John always does, he put his message in very remember easy to remember, statements and sections. And so I started practicing, those things, particularly because, they came from something that I respect, which is the Bible. And then, as Jim typically does, I started adding my own, version, to that. And in fact, I've got it on my laptop here. I don't refer to it every day anymore because, as I said earlier, my kids are a lot older, and my 7 grandkids though fall into this. But I had 5 P's, and I call it the 5 P's of parenting, and it worked for Rhonda and I. It's not perfect because you got humanity
yep.
involved, right? But prepare them,
Mm,
praise them, play with them,
mm,
protect them, and pray for
mm.
them. And that was easier for me to kind of measure and sit down with Rhonda, my wife, and think about how are we doing in these
Wow.
5 areas and what do they even mean,
Mm.
right? And so maybe we'll have time to unpack some of those. Maybe we won't, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I love the intentionality behind as 5 P's. That
Five
right?
P's,
Five
yeah.
P's. Because I think one of the tensions of gentle parenting is this pressure to conform to the ideology of gentle parenting. That excuse me, I don't have the freedom to get angry. Almost like it's almost kind of a paradox. Like I'm trying to be so emotionally healthy and embrace emotions in my kids that I'm almost stuffing my emotions,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to as a parent process my emotions. But I think on the backside of gentle parenting, really more than that, an elevated version of it is intentional parenting.
Yeah, I mean, the from what I've read so far with gentle parenting, it feels a little bit as a hybrid between a therapy session and one robot trying to program the other robot.
Mm,
And I think that there are a lot of difficulties in parenting, just like in any relationship, in a marriage, for example. So I think I think those expectations are very difficult to meet. When I see a parent lose it, uh, usually in an area exposed to, 10, 15, 20, 50 other people, it usually looks like grabbing them hard, by the arm, or yelling, knock it off, or, maybe worse than that. And when I see those things seem very human to me.
mm,
Now, if it was continuing,
right,
obviously someone's lost it. But who likes to yell at their kids?
right.
Who likes to grab their kids? It goes against the nature that God has, put in us. But to expect that to never happen,
Mm,
maybe there are some temperaments that maybe there's a person who could say, I have never grabbed my kid by the ear. I know my mom can't say that and drag me from one place to another. Maybe there are some people who can say that. I can honestly say that I never got physical with my daughter. Now, she did get a spanking from time to time,
mm,
but we can go back to this later. But when you have good boundaries, and one of the things I notice about gentle parenting that I think is correct is they do talk a lot about boundaries, and there's a really important word that they use: consistency.
mm,
I do think that applies in the 5 P's. there is a consistency that you need. Another thing I read in gentle parenting that I thought was good is that what husbands and wives, now I realize that a lot of kids are being raised by single parents. We'll come back to that later. But what's really important is that you make decisions ahead of time what the punishment, I know that's a bad word today, what the punishment or the discipline will be if they do this or do that. And that the kids, once they get to certain ages and understand, that they understand what it is. Now you actually are collaborating, but you're not sitting there down on the rug trying to, talk 2-year-old, Johnny about whether he's going to pick up his blocks or not. Or I don't know if 2-year-olds pick up blocks, but sure. I'm a little bit out of touch now.
But you're referencing one of the tenets of gentle parenting, yes, which is to get to their level.
Yeah. Well, getting to their level has some merit. It's not all bad, but when I think about getting to their level, the things that I've noticed that are very helpful as a grandfather is that when I physically get to their level, but I usually only do that in the realm of affection. When I want to hug them or connect with them. But, your basic command and control stuff like, hey, don't run in the parking lot, stay, you hold on to my belt buckle here, do not let go. I don't say, would you like to hold on to my belt buckle? Or would you like to go freestyle here? There's no room for that. And I might be mocking it to some degree. I might make somebody upset with that comment, but I think that's the danger of where it can go. Or, there are some things that it's not up for discussion.
Yeah. I want to go back to, you're talking about discipline or punishment. And you also referenced unmet expectations. And, when me and my wife found ourselves in these moments of discipline, which those dynamics are even interesting in and of themselves. I work full time and my wife has chosen to stay at home full time. And so she actually has more opportunities, if you will, to discipline our daughter. And so, we ran into some tensions where I wanted to discipline my daughter one way and my wife wanted to discipline her or had already, become accustomed to disciplining her in another way. And so when my wife might see me discipline her a different way, we had to actually have conversation. I wasn't even aware. I was like, I didn't know we were doing different things. I thought this is what, we had agreed on. And there are probably a lot of parents out there who don't even know maybe how to have that conversation or aren't even intentional about that.
Let's talk about that for a minute because that's really important before you even talk about the 5 Ps. In here on the Today Count show, we often talk about time management from a leadership perspective, but this also fits well because, as you said at the top of the show, that parenting is a form of leadership, right? And parenting needs quadrant 2 time also. And again, for the listener, quadrant 2 time is timeout time. It's timeout time where you get away as a husband and wife, if you have that luxury, and it could be for an hour, it doesn't have to be a full day summit, but you can talk about and evaluate the behavior of the child, where the child is heading, what you like, what scares you, what you think the boundaries could be that are put in place, and then together agree as to which sometimes takes some give and take, frankly, and some negotiations as to what those, and then if that's agreed upon what the punishment is, then whether you're home or not, whether she's home or not, you're still acting in consistency together. And it really messes up the kid who has learned to war one against the other.
Play both sides.
Yeah. Right. And you got to admire their creativity, but is it always making them the person, that you're trying to raise them to be? That's the other upstream quadrant 2 thing, is actually thinking and writing down, what has God how has God entrusted me with this child? Because this child isn't mine.
That's a great point.
Right. This child isn't mine. It's been by the grace of God. It's been given to us to steward and to get ready for adult life. And that's a whole nother podcast we could probably talk about that I can definitely speak to.
I kind of want to hang out there real quick because I do come across parents who though they're not saying it verbally, the way that they are parenting would lend me to believe that they find their identity in parenting, which is a dangerous place to be, because the success of a parent is to, as as you're saying, um, develop and prepare their children to go out and have their own life. But then there's, you even see it sometimes. It manifests itself in these unnatural kind of weird boundary or boundaryless um, spaces and families where marriages are kind of competing with in-laws, and it's generational, right? But what would you say to that mom or father who, man, finds their whole personhood in parenting?
Yeah, that's really good. And in fact, that kind of fits under the P protect. I believe that the best thing that you can do for your kids is to really work hard at creating a great marriage. And one thing that wars against a great marriage isn't always the evils of society. Certainly, you have to protect against that. But it is when someone has moved from being an individual soul that is trying to find its identity in Christ to someone who is married and they do not see, even though scripture tells us that the two become one, and that is true, but they still remain individual souls. So then a third personality soul enters into this community,
Mm.
and then typically the nurturer, which would be the mom, would naturally kind of move in that direction, which can be a slight to a marriage.
Mm.
And that's the power of a woman's nurturing. And then, and I don't think it matters if it's a boy or a girl, but then the same thing kind of switches if that boy, let's just say the dad is an athlete and or was in my case, way back in the day.
Way back in the days, creeping up on me too.
It happens really fast. But then you've seen it, right? You've seen in Little League everything where the dad is living vicariously through,
Mm.
their child, and their parenting then becomes an identity there. So that comes back to one of the sub points of protecting is that, we live in a dangerous world. I'm not being paranoid or anything, but part of protection is the kids know that if nowhere else is safe in the world,
Mm.
it's safe at home, and that they know, and that they're watching that my parents' commitment to one another. Gosh, sometimes it feels like it might even be more of a commitment to the marriage than to me. That's not a bad thing for that child to figure out, because that's going to help them be very, very selective in their choice. But it also teaches them, again, with the consistency, what strength is, what strength is.
You kind of talked about the power of a nurturing mother, and I've currently living it. I can feel the tension, or maybe another way to phrase it is even the temptation for a father to kind of take his hands off the wheel or take his foot off the gas, because
That's
there's
good.
such a gravitational pull for a child and the mom. They obviously have a bond that you can't recreate, being literally inside the mom, and then all of that. And so what would you say to the father, because historically I think some of the gentle parenting tenets too are kind of protesting against previously distant fathers, and there's this kind of this reaction, if you will, in this generation that, man, we're going to get it right, and maybe some overcorrection. I've seen some things online where and there's no shots to stay at home dads, but almost this overemphasis, and even to the point of our roles being switched, and should there even be roles, right? Like, but what would you say to the father who's listening that is struggling with being present, or maybe trying to overcorrect because they felt like, or they realize, man, I have been distant, I haven't been emotionally or physically present at home, and I want to get it right.
All right, you got to give me a minute to unpack that, because that's really good. And I do like how you're looking at some of this as a reaction from the previous generation. I think I kind of look at it a little bit differently. I think that it is a reaction from the previous. Some of it is a reaction from the previous generation, which is a reaction from the previous generation, which is a reaction from
Generational.
right. So I kind of see it as a constant, development of philosophy. And what we got to be careful with is, once again, we got to go back to, what's the standard? Is there best practices according to the Creator?
Mm.
And I believe that there are. I think that, well, there's just a lot of things that you said there, Winston. So let me do my best to try to hit them quickly. Again, here's another leadership principle at work. If you're trying to build something and you keep putting your hands on everything, and then you're teaching those around you that you got it, it's yours. Where a mom needs to be careful, we'll just say traditionally, all right, in your case, but also just all the genes are, moving in that direction, right? Or if psychologists want to say it's not the genes and it's conditional through our culture, okay, whatever, I don't care. But the point is that generally speaking, the vast majority of women are going to run to the baby for whatever the baby's needs are.
Yeah.
To be fed, the diaper to be changed, to be put to bed, to feed, et cetera. Without realizing it, she's doing what she loves at first. She's doing what she feels responsible for doing. But when the father isn't cognitive of actually what is going on, he's taking his hands off because she's putting her hands on. And then she has the opportunity to get bitter later on that, hey, you never help. And so if I'm speaking too much truth here, just, and to back off a little bit, I will.
It sounds like you're talking to me.
Okay. Well, but let me speak to the other part that you said about, a lot of the stay-at-home dad thing that's going on. And I do think that is something that has been happening for a long time in its minority and might fit you as a family. But generally speaking, if that's kind of the new cool thing, it might be the pendulum swinging the other way. Let me say this to the men, and let me say this to the women. Man, do not depreciate the value that you provide your kid by being a dad, by being a man, by being masculine, and the same for the mom. Do not depreciate your value of these traditional things. But let me go back to what I said before. I remember someone told me when I was younger about leadership. He says, when it comes to your relationship with God and leadership, what's going to end up happening is not so much what you get done through leadership, but what God does in you through leadership, and then eventually through you. And I think that is also true when two people parent a child. We think that we're going to change a child's life, and you definitely have the opportunity to do that. I shouldn't say change, but develop a child's life. You definitely have that opportunity. But you really learn how to become best friends, the husband and the wife, as you go through these stages in life, if you spend quadrant 2 time working through your context and what works for you as a couple. And I don't think that ancient wisdom says the man must do this, this, and this, and the woman must do this, this, and this. I don't see that in the scriptures. But I think what culture has a tendency to do is demasculate the male and to incorporate. I think I just made that up.
Sounds good.
The woman, where we should be free to pursue the things that we want as individuals, yet within the context of knowing that I got married. And so there is a piece of that equation where the two become one. And then I've got parenting. So it really grows us up as responsible adults till we go, you know what? I just learned that this life isn't about me.
I think what you're saying requires so much effort, so much intentionality, so much time, which seems to be, one of the, back to the Surgeon General's, kind of public health warning. There's this tension where parents feel like maybe they don't have the time, maybe they don't have the energy, they're working really hard, or, there's all these other dynamics. And then the temptation you find is that, other entities are parenting our kids.
Yeah. Before you go there, let's talk about that one entity. And I know where you're going with this question, but before you get there, let's talk about our reliance on media to babysit our kid
Come on.
for a period of time.
It's going to call me out right now.
Well, I want you to know this, and if the baby boomers are honest, we're not absent of technology. They were called VHS tapes. And All Dogs Go to Heaven is a movie that was near and dear to our hearts, because that little girl of mine would just watch it again and again and again. If I needed time to go mow the lawn or whatever, I could pop that in, and that movie would babysit, my daughter. And I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We just have to be careful how much, right?
Yeah.
All right, but finish where you were going on the time, the energy, and who you delegate. I think that's where you're going.
Yeah. I think I think you said the word authority that kind of triggered this idea that as parents, who are we giving authority to raise our kids? And I think knowingly or unknowingly, we shift, we delegate, we shear that authority to other entities, whether it be school, whether it be sports, or whether it be media, right? And that's not necessarily a new issue in our generation, but it's much amplified now more than ever. And then sometimes we end up turning around, and our kids aren't behaving or aren't acting like the way that we would wish, whatever that ideal is for our kids. And so what is that tension? How do we wrestle with that tension of maybe feeling like we're not equipped, or for some reason don't have what it takes to do the thing that you're talking about, but we're also frustrated that we're not seeing the results in our children or our families that we would like?
I love this podcast already, because I think we're talking about some significant, real things. And it's funny because I don't know exactly how the brain works. I got a little bit of education on how this organ, the brain, works, but the questions that you're asking me are firing off memories that I'm feeling right now, as somebody who is, I'll just admit it, a disruptor, and who can voice his opinions about the problems in our society. It does all come back to these questions that you're asking. The temptation is to throw out all kinds of platitudes. And I don't want to do that, because that's just a orator's style of sound bites.
Yeah.
Most people, I don't know if most is the right. I think most is a good term. Most parents, if they're into the public education system, or if they're into the private school system, if they have that kind of opportunity to pay for kids, they find themselves in a precarious situation, because the feedback says we're not happy with what our families are receiving through these institutions. I don't mean to be disrespectful to those that are in it. My family consists of educators, but it goes back to what we talked about before, is that when we take our hands off of something, which we have, the boomers certainly have. And so maybe downstream, what we have now is we have what appears to be this cultural war between educators and homes. So now this whole parenting podcast has opened up a whole nother chasm where people are falling into the abyss. The last time I checked, which was about a year ago, I haven't done a whole lot of studies, but homeschooling is on the rise.
Right.
And the problem with homeschooling is that as parents, you were raised in a society where you got some partnership with the school system, and now you're taking that home and adding that to your plate. So now is mommy my school teacher, or my mommy, and is daddy my math teacher, or is he my daddy, et cetera. We don't need to go back into Little House on the Prairie and all of that.
What is Little House on the Prairie? As a millennial, I just want
Okay, millennials, just you guys know how to find it. Just Google it, Little House on the Prairie, and that'll be all you need. Dang it, I always forget stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not. I've heard of it. I don't think I've literally ever seen it.
Yeah, but what were some of the other examples? Okay, so sports and then, but even church, right? I mean, these things should be a supplement to the child's experience, and I guess what I'm trying to figure out, the root of your question, is it about how much of this the kids should be involved in, how much of the parents should be involved with the kids in this. Is that kind of what you're?
I mean, just kind of all the above. I think one, I just want to speak to the fact that it's a real tension
Mhm.
because sometimes some know what to do, but they don't know how to wrestle towards it. Maybe they just keep getting discouraged, and life keeps happening. And you're like, man, I want to do that, but I don't know how to even bridge the gap. Like, I know what I'm doing is not working. I know what I could do, but how do I even get there? How do I
Yeah.
wrestle through that? Do I just give up and let the school system, or let social media, or let my environment and my dynamics just have their way, and I hope it all works out?
There's an athletic organization here in the Texas area in which we live. I don't know if it's just here. I think it's called I-9, something like that. I don't know if that's throughout the nation or not. But one thing I noticed about it, which is really interesting, is that because my youngest grandson joined T-ball, and when he goes to T-ball, the first hour, give or take, is practice, and then the second hour is a game. And I'm sitting there, going, and that's it. They don't meet again for another week. And of course, my competitive self says, well, that's not how you go pro, right? Which tells you that I've even been conditioned that athletics have become such a big industry in America and around the world that the culture is now saying, there is a lane for people to go to pursue professional sports, right? And that adds to the pressure. What I like about the athletic group that I spoke of before is it kind of speaks to what you're saying. Oh, so I bet you that's how that came about, is someone saying there's just too much going on. Can we simplify this and make it fun again? And if the kid wants to play ball more seriously later, he'll say that. I was kind of thinking that last time I was in my chair watching him play. I said, yeah, so it is a real thing. It's a real thing. Here's what I would say. Bottom line, the power of the nuclear family can be, I don't know if reestablished is the right word, but can find confidence in knowing that you don't have to do what everybody else is doing.
That's good.
And you don't have to do the same thing every year. And in fact, I do believe that studies have shown that variety creates health. You don't have to go to Hawaii every year and put yourself in debt. But what if you went to Hawaii every few years? What if you had a staycation to save some money? What if you did that? What if your kid tried this sport, tried that sport? I think that that's one of the things that I would like to see parents don't feel like they have to do what the neighbor's doing.
Yeah, I think the phrase back in the day was trying to keep up with the Joneses,
Right.
if you will. And it's almost like, in this generation, or as things have morphed even over the past, 20, 30 years, keeping up with whoever it is has been expedited, and it's on steroids, and people
Yeah.
are almost, parents are almost burnt out trying to do all the things, because there's so many things that could be done, or so many different ways to parent your kids. And it's like, there's so much information that we're inundated with. It's like, what's the right way? I'm so, there's so much anxiety around, man, I don't want to mess up my kids. I think that's a narrative that's out there, right? Trauma. And I'm the millennial generation saying, we're starting to unpack our trauma, quote unquote, from how we were parented in previous generations. But now there's this anxiety about, I don't want to damage my child, or I don't want to wound my child. What would you say to the parent that is kind of almost fearful or anxious about doing it wrong, or doing it in such a way that, man, my child's going to be in therapy?
Well, I would say this is I'd say, maybe examine your faith a little bit. God has put resiliency in us in so many different ways. And just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Just because you can do that with your kid, you can do that with your kid. You can give that, you can give that, you can give, doesn't mean you should. In fact, I'd probably say there's probably more shouldn'ts than shoulds that you can do with your kids. I know that to be true. And I stand very confident on that, particularly if we approach it with humility and grace. humility, saying, yeah, I don't know how to do this necessarily, but I'd say, yeah, you do. And maybe listen less to all the sound bites. And, now I'm sounding like an old Baptist preacher, but have some mentoring, have some people you can talk to from here to there, but trust yourself a little more.
I mean, you mentioned it, just a little bit ago, and I thought it was powerful. Permission to curate, your life, curate your family. Like everybody is so accustomed now, to looking everywhere else and trying to get the blueprint or trying to find the shortcut or trying to copy paste in Q2 time, figuring out, okay, who is God giving me? What is the unique child and the unique gifting or children? What is the unique kind of environment that God has kind of set, my family in? What is the thing about us that makes us us, and how do we steward that? How do we wrestle with the weaknesses, but then how do we lean into the strengths? What makes us laugh? Like making sure that we're in touch with who we are versus trying to morph to everything else around us that seems easier, seems better.
Yeah, you got a couple of things going on in the grandparent realm that I think can help parents if they have that luxury. One of the problems with grandparents, of course, is speaking from firsthand experience, is I'm concerned about my 7 grandkids. And do I sometimes, peek over the fence to see how my kids are raising their kids? I would be a liar to say that that isn't true. So that's the downside of probably having grandparents around. But if you do have grandparents around, tell me if I'm wrong. They usually calm things down. They usually calm parents down. They usually say, he'll be fine. He'll work through that. Oh, you did that? I mean, if you came clean on something that you feel bad about, mostly the response will go, yeah, I remember that. I did that.
Yeah, my wife, she'll, something will happen to our daughter and she might get, amped up, and I'll say, she'll be all right. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to call my mom. And, and then her mom says the exact same thing. And then she's fine. I'm like, oh, okay. I think
she looks at you. What do you know, buddy? I may have just wounded her for life.
Or she's like bleeding and she's like, no, she'll be all right. Just scuffed her knee. But
I even tease with my kids today about, they'll do something or react to something or try to, drag me through the mud on something. I'm going, okay, we're bringing up the father wound line here. What father wounds do you have? And I think, being open and conversation in safe circles, helps. I would just, again, reiterate what you've asked. What you're saying is you have everything you need to be a good parent. And you're not going to get it right every day, every week, every month. Your kid is going to have problems. I paused for effect. And it doesn't matter whether you steal the Joneses kids and give them yours. You're going to find out the Joneses kids have problems too. Some are better at covering it up than others, but we all go through life making mistakes, having behavioral issues of some sort. There's usually something that we have to work through.
And you've said this to me before, and to others in leadership contexts, but essentially that, and correct me if I butcher this, but love and pain are kind of on the same coin. And to truly love your kids well and to love your family well, it is being willing to endure and encounter pain that you've never felt, worrying about your grandchildren, worrying about your children. Not that we are proponents of worry, but it's unavoidable to experience pain if you're truly going to be invested and be integrated, in your child's life, and your family is going to, know that depth of love versus, the surface level stuff that I think sometimes it's easier to do the surface level stuff, go on the vacations, buy the gifts, and, give our kids what they want, financially, or, but to really go through the hard stuff and come out as a better family on the other side of it, which not a lot of people seemingly are willing to go through. They're trying to curb the pain or numb the pain or avoid the pain, and just are looking for, just the happy moments.
Yeah, it's good. You learned early on as a parent, Winston, as did I, that your beautiful little girl is a stinking sinner. And so, it takes two to tango.
Mm,
And what you're trying to do is, so what that generally means is they don't, in some ways, they don't know any better because they're living full out selfishness. And I would try to set some parents free to an extent where, as a parent, it's not your job to entertain your kids. It's not your job to make them happy. And when you are tired, you come home and you are tired. There's nothing wrong with telling your kid that you're tired. I'm a human being and I'm tired. So no, I'm not going to be able to get on the floor and play blocks with you. I'm not going to be able to, do this with you. And now, if that becomes our pattern, but that's not what we're talking about. I think what we're talking about, what it seems like to me that we've been talking about in this podcast without saying it, is where's the bar? And I'm saying that it sounds to me like this gentle parenting, that bar is on another planet. And I think there's certainly some very good marketing phrases in there, some really good ideals in there, but you don't teach a child to collaborate until you teach a child to obey.
wow.
Um, there are steps that have to happen. When they get a certain age, I can see more and more collaboration coming. Otherwise, they can't go off to college.
Mm.
They can't go off and do those kinds of things. I would like to do a podcast go through the 5 Ps.
Yeah, that'll be a great next time we jump
Okay.
on for parenting. But I think we'll land the plane here, and man, we can officially say we have one in the books in the studio.
Yeah. Yes.
One of many to come. And man, thank you for your time, Jim. And for those joining us, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us here at the Today Count Show. Be sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you listen or watch so you don't miss any content. And stay tuned for more coming soon.